Hello! We are back for another week of the She Got Lucky podcast, dropping every Monday so you can start your week with an absolute bang. The bangest of bangs. I don't know if that's right, but anyway, we're going to go with it. So if this is your first time, the She Got Lucky podcast is all about giving you the vulnerability, the ups and downs, what it really took to get quote unquote lucky in the world of business. I invite on some incredible guests who really have achieved what most would say is impossible. And today is no exception. Today I've got on an incredible woman who I have had the privilege of watching her journey absolutely blow up. A few years ago, Anna came into my world, and since then, she has absolutely gone from strength to next level to a whole freaking new universe. Since then, Anna has built her social community from just under 1,000 followers to over 340,000. She has become known as the one, so much so that she was offered a book deal with Penguin and is now the author of The Vagus Nerve Reset. Now, there's many reasons why I invited Anna to come onto the show today. Not only is she the one in her space, not only has she blown her brand up just monumentally, and I know there's so much that you can learn from going behind the scenes of how she did that, but Anna is also a qualified counselor, coach, and integrative nervous system therapist. She passionately supports individuals to come home to themselves through harnessing the healing power of their unique physiology, body, and nervous system. Anna integrates her background in psychology and counseling with somatics, breathwork, let me get this right, polyvagal, gosh, I hope I got that correct, polyvagal theory, and holistic practices to create a functional, effective, and practical therapeutic approach to anxiety, stress, and trauma. Anna, welcome to the She Got Lucky podcast. I am excited. I am just like, this is going to be an episode like no other. So thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Alicia, I mean, I think the feeling is mutual because I have followed you since I think you began your Instagram. So I am just here for all of it and all of you.
Oh, likewise. You know, we've just had a little brief chat, and why I was so excited for this episode, because I really do think that you are the one. I love bringing women onto the podcast who are the one in their own space. And when it comes to nervous system, anxiety, working through it, and are in a really beautiful, like, modern way in a sense, I just think of you straight away. So I'm very excited. But before we dive on in, we always get started with your She Got Lucky story. But I thought, let's change things up today. Let's be a little bit spontaneous. So I want to just invite you to, perhaps for anyone listening, they're in the sort of day-to-day, all right, I'm going to listen to the podcast, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. I would love you to sort of like just allow us to come back to the present, calm us before we get into our beautiful discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share one of my favorite regulation techniques that takes a few moments and you can kind of do, especially if you're working on your computer all the time and you get stuck on that screen. It can really send us into that sympathetic fight or flight state, because when our eyes are like honed in, it signals to our mind that we have to be focused on a singular point instead of having a really broad, safe perspective of what's going on around us. So if you are someone that is working on your computer, I don't recommend this if you are in a car at the moment. I just want you to come back to this when you are in that space that you can utilize this technique. So we are going to just close down our eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine a beautiful horizon out in front of you. So you can see the circular kind of angle of the earth coming from one side to the other side of your vision. Maybe you're looking out on an ocean, maybe you're looking out on a forest, maybe you're looking out the mountains, maybe it's just grass out in front of you, but just looking at the horizon and allowing your eyes to extend as far as possible over that curvature of the earth and just really relaxing into that space. So you're broadening your eyesight, your perspective, and just feel the senses that kind of ground into that space as well. And just taking a nice deep breath here and exhaling through pursed lips. And then whenever you're ready, you can blink your eyes back open and come back into the space. And I always like to just take a good look all the way around your room or the space that you're in, the environment, look behind you. And this is a really beautiful orienting kind of exercise for us because, like I said, when we're looking at one singular focal point, like our laptops or our phones or even someone in front of you, it signals to our brain that everything has to be focused on this singular point, which is a very sympathetic experience for our nervous system, right? So we want to expand our eyes and we want to relax our eyes, which are connected to our vagus nerve. And then when we open our eyes and look around, it just sends signals of safety to our body as well. There's nothing behind us to fear. There's nothing around us. We're in our safe space. So that's one of my favorite regulation techniques that you can kind of utilize throughout the day as you're going as well.
I instantly felt better. Perfect episode, isn't it? Am I being a little bit selfish? I'm like, everyone's going to love this, especially me. But as someone who's always got so many things running around in their brain, I love the idea of this. And I can't tell you the amount of reels of yours that I've saved. Like I've got a saved folder of Anna showing little techniques, little things. And one thing I love about everything you do is it's quite short. And I think that that's a really great way for people who are quite high functioning. Yeah, I love the idea of calming myself. I love the idea of meditating, but I don't want to give 20 minutes. I don't want to give half an hour. And so I feel like such a beautiful way for you to allow your body to start to experience the change and the shift because of doing this. You just always deliver on that. And thank you so much for sharing that because that was beautiful.
You're so welcome. And I'm 100% here for the functionality of things. I do not ever want anyone to kind of like have to set aside time out of their day that pushes. I just think that's not how we work as humans. So if you can make it as small as possible, as effective as possible, then you're actually going to utilize it. And that is what we want in our day-to-day life.
100%. So look, Anna, I would love to, before we dive into a little bit of perhaps your own journey with how you've sort of got to this place where you have such a deep love of helping others with this, I would love to allow you to share perhaps your own She Got Lucky story. You have seen such incredible results by showing up on social media, sharing your experiences, sharing value. You share so much value and you show up as the authority. And something that blows my mind is that when it comes to this world, I find that it could be very easy for people to kind of enter and they're really good. They can really help people. But to really own this space, I think is a harder thing to do. And so I would love to know if you've perhaps had a moment where everything you have done to get to where you are, like someone has said something or made that comment, well, you got lucky or it's only because of X.
Yeah. And I'm so excited to actually share this story because I feel like I get to talk about like mental health all the time, which I absolutely love. But my business journey is also just such a wild ride and has been a wild ride for my nervous system as well. And you are deeply intertwined with my She Got Lucky story too. So I can't remember the year, but when Reels first came out, I remember being like, no, not for me, because I still experienced a high amount of anxiety. And I was like, no way am I going to be filming myself, dancing, doing any of these things. That is just not my style. And so I'm plodding away in my business. I maybe had like under 1,000 followers and I see Alicia just killing it and starting to just take off doing reels. And I got jealous, right? I got jealous of you. I was like, what? All of these people are like utilizing reels and blowing up all over the place. Like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I not doing this one thing that I could see is actually really beneficial? And so you were the first person that I saw like taking reels and taking it to the next level and actually just expanding that whole space and also welcoming other people in a really functional and effective way. Like I would look at your reels, I'm like, all right, how does she do that transition? And like you teach us all of those things. So I decided that I was going to do a 30 days reel challenge. So I'd had a little bit of success in my business, but not particularly like that successful on Instagram. So I was like, I'm going to do a 30-day reel challenge. I did the 30 days. I'm like, okay, I'm like starting to get the hang of this. I maybe gained like 50 followers. It wasn't much. And I was like, I'm going to do another 30 days. And so I did it for another 30 days. And I'm like, okay, I'm actually enjoying these now. And they're actually way easier for me to do. And I like doing it. And I'm starting to see some traction, people commenting. So I did another 30 days and another 30 days. And I think I ended up doing 6 months straight of reels every single day, like no days off, Christmas, New Year, all of it. I just kept going no matter what. That was like my one thing was like, you have to post a reel every single day until something changes in your business. And I was just like super dogged about it. And I don't recommend this for other people because it was a lot of work. It was a shitload of work. But what it did for me was that my business went from a couple of thousand followers to a reel going viral after 6 months. So I'd been doing reels every day for 6 months. And then around that 6-month point, one of my reels went viral. I think I jumped up to 10,000 people and I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And then it kept happening. And my followers like jumped up to 50,000. And then I hit 100,000 in the space of like 2 weeks. And I was like, that's when I started to have like panic attacks. I was like, oh my God, this is too much responsibility now. I have too many people watching me. I really have to take stock of what it is that I'm sharing and how I'm sharing. So a little bit of self-censorship kind of came into the game, but it made me reassess how I was sharing information as well, which I think in the end helped me kind of skyrocket my business even further. So what I did was I started to post all of the references that I use for all of my science-based kind of posts. And that was one of the things that I find most people come back to my page for, because they're like, I love that you reference all of this scientific data and it's so transparent, right? And now I'm almost at 350,000 followers and I don't post reels all that often anymore. But it was, if anyone thinks it was an overnight thing, I'd been in business for 3 years prior to doing this. I'd been doing the hard yards, working, I'd posted basically every day, but then I switched to doing reels. Like I sometimes posted 3 reels a day for 6 months straight. Like it was next level amount of content that I was putting out. And I nearly broke my relationship doing this because I was just working all the time. But it paid off in spades because my business like absolutely blew up. And I think part of that was like, I was so sure about what I was sharing as well. Like there was no qualms. There was no doubt in my mind that what I was doing was beneficial for other people. And that was really motivating for me. So even when I would get like nasty comments on my posts or things with other people, that always spurred me on to be like more confident about the information that I was sharing, more sure of the references that I could pull up when people question me, more able to articulate and be eloquent in how I do those like interactions with people. And so it has been, I think I've been in business now for 6 years, and over the past 12 months, I've written a book. I was approached by Penguin Publishers. I wrote a book. I started a podcast. I'm very, very not consistent with my podcast. I have like multiple programs and ways that I support people, but I also just have a lot more space to kind of actually be in my zone of genius now, as opposed to doing all of the things that I was doing at the start of my business to where I am now. So it has been a hard slog. So no one gets lucky, unfortunately. But most of my friends were like, well, you blew up overnight, right? And I was like, no. I was putting in like 60-hour weeks for a long period of time trying to get anyone to take notice of what I had to say. And it wasn't until some people started taking notice that people were like, wow, you're so amazing. I'm like, yeah, I was doing this all along, you know? Yeah. And so it is about like, sometimes you feel like no one's listening to you, no one's watching. That's fine. Like, they will listen to you and they will watch you the more that you stay consistent with it and the more confident you are in the messaging that you have for other people.
There's so much in that, Anna. Like, thank you for vulnerable share, because you shared so many things in there that you could have held back, but you were completely open and honest about it. And I just think that's so freaking incredible. The fact that you weren't seeing the results, but you kept going anyway. Like the fact that you kept challenging yourself, the fact that you kept persevering. And at the end of the day, you know, naturally, like I've experienced experienced that as well. It's very similar things. When I was blowing up and it was just reel after reel after reel, everything was going so well. I also found myself kind of like self-sabotaging myself. Like, oh, this is getting too big. This is getting too much. I want to stop growing. The more people, and I started to, it was sort of my first experiences with those negative comments as well. And as somebody who always took so much from other people's opinions, that was a real shock to my system, being like, okay, this needs work, because I'm not going to be able to show up and do the work I want to do and need to do if I'm allowing random Bob021022 saying that like my lips look like fossils and my dancing in this and all sorts of things, right? And so I did find myself starting to be like, okay, oh my gosh, the negative comments, I don't want to blow up anymore because then more negativity will come. And I'm sorry that you experienced that as well, but I just think that so many people see, oh wow, that reel blew up, or you've gone wild, your business is going so well, you've got all these followers. And to know those thoughts that were happening behind the scenes is everything. So I've got a few questions. First of all, when your Instagram was blowing up, when reels were going viral consistently and you're really building that traction, how did you go with seeing the growth on Instagram and then seeing the growth in your business?
Yeah. So I think they didn't go hand in hand with one another. I was, like you said, I'm really good at giving value and I am literally an open book. I will offer support as much as possible. And I think that didn't necessarily translate to sales, right? And so a lot of the time, I think this is where I was learning a lot from you, was how do I start to shift the focus to conversations and connection, so that what I really found was sales and like that upgrade in my business actually occurred in the DMs, where people were actually communicating with me and I built some form of relationship. So I did something also equally as wild, was that I would voice memo DM every single new follower that I had. To say, hey, my name's Anna. Thanks so much for being here. If you ever have a question or you want to ask about certain topics, feel free to send me a message. And this did a number of things. First, it opened a relationship with the person. It broke down that barrier that I was just someone on the internet. Second, it gave me a shitload of content from people. So what were people struggling with? What did they need help with? How could I best what were my expertise and how did they align with what people were asking? So that gave me the capacity to get a look into my clientele. And that was when I really started to understand the nitty-gritty of business. I would say that I was a businesswoman beforehand, but I really learned the ropes of what it was to be a businesswoman once I had people coming through the door being like, so what do you sell? And me being like, well, it's kind of cute and small. Don't worry about it if you don't want to buy it. I started to had to build my confidence in saying this is how I can help you. I can't give you direct advice in the DMs, but I want to give you a small win so that then we build this relationship. And I think that was a really hard shift for me because like you, being there for other people and what other people desire has always been one of my traits. I'm very much the person that people come to for emotional support, and any form of shutting down that kind of conversation with anybody was against my kind of natural way of being. So I had to really put in boundaries were the first thing that I really had to put in place, boundaries for my time and energy, but also understanding I desire to help people. So that equates to me having to sell. In order to serve people, I have to sell. And this allows me to maintain my business in a way that is sustainable for myself, but also for the people that I want to serve the most, which is my audience. And I think that was a very steep learning curve because my nervous system was not ready for that. Because like I said, once I hit 100K, I felt like I had so much responsibility to care for everybody that kind of came through the door. And at the end of the day, I kind of had to let go of that sense of, that everyone needs to be cared for and instead respect that people can care for themselves. I can only put out information and they can take it or leave it type of thing. But it is my responsibility to make sure that the information that I am giving out is worthy of them. And so this all kind of happened all at once, and I don't think that I was ready for it. Every day I was like, I wish I'd go viral. I wish I'd go viral. And then when I did go viral, I was like, no more. I don't want to go viral anymore. Like, I'm not ready for this. Yes. And so I think they kind of like piggybacked on one another, but it was more, I had a lot of exposure and my business wasn't ready to handle that kind of exposure just yet. And so it was kind of this playing catch up in that. And then I ended up bringing on someone, Tabitha, my beautiful community manager, which really helped me kind of delegate some tasks because I was just completely overwhelmed from the whole thing. And so, yeah, I think since then it's only been more confidence and the capacity to hold space for whatever social media throws at me. I'm not really swayed by much anymore. I love when people get angry in my comment section. I actually thrive on like haters. I think it's actually a really beautiful opportunity to like learn and to share like more knowledge that helps people shift their perspective. And so people always comment on my nose ring in the comments. That's like the most fun thing for people to comment on. Your nose ring gives me so much more anxiety. And it's like, whatever. Like, I actually don't care. So I think it's given me just personally, like, so much more confidence in myself. But in my business, it was not the same kind of, it was like, this was the exposure. My business was down here and I really needed to play catch up.
A really, really big lesson here, Anna, that I just want to sort of point out that you've given us is whether it's followers, whether it's sales, whether it's more clients, more students, one of the things that I've learned, and you've just heard Anna's explained as well, is we want it. And I've really come to believe that it happens when like life gives us these things when we're ready to handle them in a sense. We may not feel ready, but we're ready to handle them. And so many people I talk to, they're like, I just want to go viral. I just want to like have my new course get 100 new clients or students. And what we don't actually realize is perhaps the reason it's not happening is actually a blessing because we're not physically set up. We don't necessarily have the processes. We don't have, the legal documents, the support, the boundaries, whatever it might be. And so this idea of trusting the process of life, the process of your journey, I take a lot of comfort in believing in this because so often I do see people wanting it so badly. And it happens when they're actually, whether it's them personally, whether it's their business, whether it's XYZ, like it's ready for it to happen. I don't want to misinterpret what I mean here because I always like to take action before being ready. But in the sense of results, it has a really beautiful way of happening in the timing of things. And I think you've just shared that in such a great way is you were wanting it to happen. You're wanting it to happen. And when it did happen, you're like, crap, I'm actually not ready for this. And that actually sort of caused a little bit of a bump in the road and you to learn that lesson sort of in the hard way. But as well, I think a really, really beautiful point that you did make is, I also, when I started the social impact, I would message every new follower. I would message individually. I would message them. And I found such beautiful connections from doing that. Some people are still like cheering me on and, in my world today. But at the same time, it is also up to you to understand when that's not perhaps maintainable anymore. And so I love that you shared that because I really think that doing that, going out of your way to do that, building that connection is a great way. And I think a lot of the people that perhaps we look up to these days, we see them and we're like, oh, well, they wouldn't do it. I remember someone saying to me, would Tony Robbins go through his DMs? Would Jenna Kutcher go through her DMs one by one and message everyone back? And like, I know the answer. But as well, can't necessarily compare where they're at to what we should be doing and, how we should be acting. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing that you started doing that. But you also got to the point where you're like, rather than responding to every DM, and this is something I was advised by my mentor as well, it's like, rather than responding to every DM, use your content to answer the questions. Use your content to, rather than DMing one and giving one person that value, share it in your content. interrupting this episode because I want to let you know about a gift I have for you right now. 3 days ago, I dropped a new offer and I've done something a little crazy, something I haven't done before, but I really am focusing on how I can help you, how I can give back to you right now and have a whole lot of fun doing it. So I have launched a brand new offer called Reels to Clients. This is a 5-day training series where it is short, to the point trainings that will allow you to instantly implement what you're learning so that you can start seeing results and start turning your reels into clients. This is not just another post this B-roll or post this basic AF content hook. No, this is actually taking you through the psychology of why someone not only watches your reels, but also takes action. For a limited time, I'm giving this to you absolutely free. So click the link in the show notes and you can jump on in and join over 200 other incredible entrepreneurs, coaches, and leaders in the service field really take control of their reels and start turning them into clients on repeat. I can't wait to see you in there. But for now, let's get back to the episode. So much there, Anna, but I want to take a little bit of a shift because otherwise I'm like, we could go down this path forever. I want to take a little bit of a sidestep. So you mentioned that you went into survival mode. It was long hours. It was having an impact on your relationship because what led to the point where you're like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write everything and share everything. And it might not be linear. I might have got the sort of journey mixed up a little bit, but can you talk us through that survival mode and how you overcame that with pretty much what you teach others now?
Yeah. So it starts when I was 10 years old. I was in a roller coaster accident and it was just one of those experiences that just shatters your world, right? Mm-hmm. So I went from just being a very vivacious, outgoing kid, like I'd make friends with literally anybody walking down the street, to becoming a super sullen young woman who was very rebellious, very angry. And it was this experience where I felt extremely disconnected from myself, but I felt extremely disconnected from everyone else. And so I withdrew from the world. I experienced like super high anxiety and then like super high or low freeze where I just wouldn't move. I'd stay in my bed for weeks on end. And as I became a teenager, this turned into using substances and finding ways to kind of dull that experience and put myself out there more. And I'd been going to therapy for a decade before I was like, I don't think retelling my story over and over and over again is quite helping me.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the
choir. I just got very sick of coming out of those sessions feeling much, much worse than what I went into them. And so I just kind of put a cork in actually going to talk therapy for a while. And in that period of time, I decided to start doing kickboxing, Muay Thai. So something super physical that I hadn't done before. And I showed up to this lesson and I could barely make it through the first portion of it. But by the end of it, I was like, holy cow, like this is the first time that I actually feel my body. I don't feel numb. I don't feel disconnected. I feel confident. I feel powerful. I can feel like every blood vessel just dilating, like screaming for oxygen. Like this feels really good. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of sparked my curiosity, like in terms of how movement can shift the way in which we are mentally experiencing the world around us. And so that was just kind of the catalyst for me to go down a path because I was studying psychology. I finished my psychology degree. I went on to study counseling and I was like, there's something missing here. Like I'm just learning more about talk therapy and I really know that there's so much more to this mind-body connection. So long story short, I ended up getting into somatics and polyvagal theory and basically going down a path of like, I learned all of these things, but I was like, okay, but what are the actual tools? Like I understand the idea of like being in our body and being grounded. And I scientifically understand all the data and this is all up here. How do I actually find tools and resources that help me move through it in the moment, but on a day-to-day basis to allow my nervous system to release this anxiety? And so that was why I started my business page. It was really just a reflection of like what I had learnt and what I wanted to share with other people because I thought it would be helpful. And in doing so over the years, that has obviously caught the attention of quite a few people, including the publishers, which allowed me to, they kind of reached out to me and said, I thought it was a scam. I got this email one day saying like, do you want to write a book? And I was like, what? Yes. Like I just ignored the email for like a week, and then I was like, maybe I should respond and just see if it's an actual human on the other side. And so that was.
Isn't it funny how any of these things, and it's so common, like I could go back and go through the episodes, like, and even myself. When I got that email from Meta, I was like, this is a scam. When I got the email from Nova, like saying we want to do a podcast, I was like, this is a scam. It's like, I don't know what's wrong with the world, but the fact that we get good emails with epic opportunities that we've worked very hard for, that we're like, it's got to be a scam. It's too good to be true. Like, there's something in that. But anyway, no, 100%. So you thought you got your email from the publisher, and it took you a bit because you were sure it was a scam.
Yeah. And then I ended up sitting like, well, they were in the UK. So I sat down and I chatted with this editor, and I was like, okay, like this is real and this is happening. And it's so surreal to me because when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was write. All I wanted to do was be a writer. And here I was talking to a publisher who was interested in me writing a book. And it was just like this full circle moment where I was like, I've just completed like a dream of mine to become an author. And so that was an interesting process too, because, you know, although I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, I had no idea how to write a book. So there was a lot of things that came up when I was going through that writing process of like, I don't know how to write. No one wants to read my book. How am I meant to do this? Like so many questions that is this going to be success? Is anyone even going to care that I've written a book type of thing? But I think at the end of the day, what has always kind of pushed me through is knowing and seeing the reactions on people's faces or the messages from people, and even my own personal experiences like, no, this stuff actually works. And I am testament to moving through from suicidal ideation, from not having friends and not having anyone to talk to becoming my own business owner, to becoming a wife and a mother, and to becoming a friend, to becoming involved in my community and being here and now and being able to speak to you and have this conversation without feeling so self-conscious and introspective that I can't even put into words how I'm feeling. And so when I think of that, it's just like a no-brainer that I have to do what I'm doing. It's just my mission in life to continue on. And I think when you do something that feels so connected to especially your own experiences, it's like you can't fail when you live in alignment with that, when you project that sort of persona and warmth onto other people. People immediately know that you are being totally authentic with what you're doing. And I think when you go on social media, because it is so saturated, that's what makes you stand out. Is like, I see Alicia, and I know you talk about your mental health struggles. I know you talk about all of the things that are hard for you. And I'm so sick of seeing people never talk about these things, right? Like you were the first person that were like sharing something difficult, and that opened the door for me to be like, hey, like this is what's been difficult for me in my life. And when you do that, even if it's not even kind of connected to your actual business or product that you're selling, people relate to it so much more because they see themselves in your story. So I think the key, I've gone off tangents here, but key takeaway is like your story and your journey and your experience is what you are essentially selling as value. Even if your product is totally unrelated to that, that is what people end up buying from. And so if you can lean into that, like that vulnerability of who you are and feel comfortable with sharing that, then it just helps you continue on even when it's shit hard.
Yeah. And I really, really love this. And I want to add, because I struggled really, really bad with depression like 6 months into my business. And it was the only thing keeping me going. I was working from bed. The only time I would get dressed or put makeup on was for a call, and I was a mess. And it was sort of like my business that kept me going. And I did start to share that online. One big thing that I learned, because there was times where people said, you need to be a little bit less vulnerable. Like, you're sharing too much. No one's going to buy from you, you know, like XYZ. And last of the time when people were saying this, I was kind of like, fuck you. Like, it's like the audio right now that's going around with Taylor Swift, and it's like, I'm being too loud in the house that I bought with the money from, you know, that song. Like, it was kind of like that vibes. However, I now reflect and I can see where their heart was, right? I can see where their advice was. And one thing that I would say is 100% vulnerability is a superpower. And especially if you are a business owner, you're a service provider, and you're wanting to be seen as an authority, vulnerability doesn't take away from that. However, one thing I would say, if I look back at what I did share, the thing that I would do differently was I tended to share a lot of like, I'm feeling crappy right now. I'm not happy right now. And one thing I would say, again, it's your platform. You get to do what you want. But just from my experience, one thing that I've learned from doing that is there's a lot of power in allowing yourself to go through whatever you're going through. And once you've gone through it, then then share, because there's value in, I felt like this. I didn't want to show up. I didn't want to go to this event. What you saw was this behind the scenes. My relationship was like, whatever it might be. But that vulnerability, when you can provide the value to others rather than necessarily using it as a Dear Diary, that's the one shift that if I can like add something here that I really learned, because 100% I was the same. I was like, I got off a call with my hypnotherapist because I myself could not do any more talking. And I was like, I've just dealt with like 20 years of like everything. And I was crying on my stories, and looking back, I was like, I could have done that a little bit differently. But anyway, so all right, let's take another beautiful sidestep. So let's talk about, so your book is called The Vagus Nerve Reset. And I would love to talk about, because I hear these words a lot, and I would love a bit of like a bit of a beginner's guide to the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, the vague nerve, the somatic release. Like, there's a lot of these words that I see, and like, they sound calming. They sound very intelligent, but like, I don't know what they mean.
That's why I started my business. It was to sound more intelligent when I could say all these words. And you know what's super interesting? When I was in the deepest kind of anxiety and depressive states, that I would get very tongue-tied. And so when I started my business, trying to say these words on social media became extremely difficult. And it was one of the things that I really struggled to do. So now, hopefully, I will be able to get through explaining all of this without getting tongue-tied for you. But now I don't actually care if I do, so it's all good. But crash course on our nervous system, and just starting to understand like what the nervous system is, how it impacts our day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. So basically our nervous system consists of our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. So our central nervous system is our brain and our spine, and this is kind of like the commander-in-chief, and this is how it sends messages through our spinal network. Now the peripheral nervous system is everything else that comes off our spine and brain. And in that peripheral nervous system is our autonomic nervous system. So it's going to get, there's like branches in branches. So just stick with me. So where the realm that I primarily tend to work within is in this autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system takes care of all of the things that we don't have to think about. So your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your digestive system, it is all of the functions that just happen automatically. And the reason why this is an important system to look at is because where our survival responses live. And so you've probably heard of the fight or flight response, and the freeze response as well is in there too. But this is all governed by this unconscious, involuntary, automatic system, our autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system is broken up further into a few parts. And the first part is that sympathetic nervous system, which is our mobilization system. All systems go, gas pedal. That is what we use to laugh. It is what we use to breathe in. It is what we use to be intimate with other people. But it is also what we use when we get a fright and our heart rate increases, so that we have increased power in our arms and legs, that we have more oxygen and blood pumping around our body. So the sympathetic nervous system is like your gas pedal. It's mobilization. It's taking action. Now, on the flip side of that, we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is often called our rest and digest system, or the brake pedal to our sympathetic. And I tend to think of it more as like a balance instead of like putting the gas pedal on and gas pedal off. It's, you want to have this balance that kind of tips from time to time, because we need to activate and we need to deactivate, and we don't always want to be in this plateaued state. But our parasympathetic nervous system can be further broken up. And this is where it gets a little complicated, and we introduce the vagus nerve into the picture, into two branches. So your vagus nerve is a really long nerve that starts in your brainstem and kind of goes all the way through to about your diaphragm, and it controls your things like heart rate, your breathing rate, your digestive system, and it acts as this communication highway between the body and the brain. So it is how your body sends a message to your brain to say, I'm hungry, I need to eat food. And then your brain says, okay, we'll secrete these hormones so that you can get your digestive enzymes going. And so it is fundamental in how we operate as a full human being. So if you don't have this communication highway, then we have that huge disconnect. Our body would just be doing whatever it wanted, and our brain would be like trying to put out spot fires and not being able to communicate that or enact change to our body. So we need our vagus nerve to create that kind of tether between the mind and body. And then it is also 75% made up of parasympathetic fibers. So it makes up 75% of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically how you relax. And to complicate things further, it has a front side of the nerve and a back side of the nerve. So that front side of the vagus nerve is called the ventral vagal, so forward facing. And this is where we feel things like intimacy, connection, calm. It's where we're relaxed, we're curious, we can be most ourselves. But the back side of the vagus nerve is called the dorsal or back-facing part of the vagus nerve, and this is where the freeze response lives. So we have three different systems in our nervous system. We have our sympathetic nervous system, we have our ventral vagal nervous system, our forward part of our vagus nerve, and we have our dorsal vagal nervous system, which is our back part of our vagus nerve, which is also part of our parasympathetic nervous system, but that is where the freeze response comes in. So Alicia, you were talking about feeling depressed before. This is your dorsal vagal nervous system. It's where your parasympathetic nervous system has spiked so high that it kind of shuts down that any sort of arousal from happening. So things like getting out of bed become increasingly difficult because we don't have any form of arousal in our system. Your body has gotten overwhelmed and it's decided it's much safer and easier and energy conserving to not move that much, not have to breathe as much, have your heartbeat rate much lower. You generally feel a bit colder as well. You don't feel as warm or like sweat as much in that state, and we conserve energy. So that's a very long-winded way, even though I was like crash course on the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, no, that was a good crash course. I'm feeling definitely we need some visuals like going on to like balance, like as in match this, because as you were talking, I was doing all my little imaginations of what it was. And when you said dorsal, I was also like, okay, Alicia, stop imagining dolphins right now, right? We're not thinking about dolphins, we're thinking about the dorsal part of the vagus nerve. Yes. Anyway, so no, that was absolutely brilliant. So I love how you sort of brought that into context in a sense, because for anyone listening who's kind of like, okay, cool. So it's all essential to how we function. It does play a part, but it's also very easy, I find, for business owners to be like, I need to prioritize me. I need to do this. I need to do that. But can we talk about, for many business owners, and I know that you'll know them, perhaps it's yourself, perhaps you're thinking of me, right? But business owners perhaps that at one point or another have just been going 100% full out. And there's this constant need to be busy. There's this constant need to get things done. There's just a constant need, like I can't stop. Oh, time with my partner? Like, yes, that's important to me, but for some reason, my body and mind isn't that putting that as a priority, you know? Like, I have to get this done. So can we talk about, like, by sort of maybe leaving that as a priority and allowing our nervous system to really, what would you say, like unbalance, dysregulate? Like, can we talk about the effects of that and what play it does start to build up to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is so common, and that was common in me too, even though I'm like fully aware of what was happening. I couldn't stop it from happening because when my business was going gangbusters, I was like, okay, I can't stop now because it'll all fall apart if I stop, right? And so when we have a trigger that causes a stress response in our body, it releases adrenaline and cortisol. So this is to essentially make you take an action. So if you are at home and you get an email from someone and you go, oh my God, it's essentially nudging you to take some form of action on that thing. Now, this is a good thing because without it, we are in that depressed state and we can't take action. And so we are not able to kind of finish the stress response cycle. So we get that trigger, it nudges us to take action. Now, what essentially happens is that if we either don't take action on that thing, we see something, I've got the thumbs up. We see something and we think, oh no, that's too big and scary. Like, oh, it's a deadline that I don't want to deal with, and we don't take action on it. We don't finish the stress response cycle. Or if we are completely inundated with lots of stresses that are coming through in our day-to-day life, which a lot of people are, we're faced with lots of chronic stresses in our day-to-day life because we're all super busy, then we have like all of these stress responses starting up and they're trying to finish, but we're not able to take action on absolutely everything that occurs in our body in the moment. And so what happens is we have all of these kind of open stress responses that we're getting stuck in this dysregulated state of being stuck in a sympathetic state. So high anxiety, high kind of drive to do things. And this is where people are like, oh, I'm just super motivated. It's like, no, you're probably just really stuck in a sympathetic dominant state, because in this state, it's beneficial for a short period of time for sure. But what happens is you're burning through lots of glucose. You're kind of depleting all of your energy stores. You're taking lots of action, but that action kind of becomes disjointed and not attached to what you actually need to be doing, because we start to have this sense of urgency that I need to do something in order to keep myself safe. But we're no longer sure of what it is that we need to do in order to keep ourselves safe anymore, because we're too far removed from that original trigger. So if you get home from work or you finish your day of work and you're like, I can finally relax. And then your brain goes, but what about this? I need to do that. Oh, you didn't finish this. And then you go on your phone, you start writing a to-do list, or maybe you start scrolling on Instagram, and you keep yourself in that sympathetic state, because essentially your body and your nervous system starts to actually feel most at home in that state. And that unfortunately leads to a lot of burnout and a lot of people resenting their businesses because they're like, it's too hard. And we put all of these other things like our relationships on the back burner, and we go, well, it's not as important as this email. It's not as important as this reel. It's not as important as this business deal, because that's a nice, safe thing to do. But all of these things kind of fuel that feeling of safety, because it allows us to move in a direction that we think is correct. So I think I'm going to say majority of people, and I think it's fundamentally necessary to a certain degree in our businesses to have this response, because if you're not wanting to like go all in, sometimes it can be a bit difficult to get to where you want to go. But it is also important to notice when it runs away from you and it becomes the default, as opposed to something that you utilize as a tool to get shit done. And then you're able to down regulate and come back into that connected, calm state again to be present with the people around you too.
Gosh, yeah. And because one of the first times I heard anyone sort of like connect the dots with nervous system in a sense was, I think I was getting a facial, and maybe 2 years ago, I was getting a facial and I sort of fell asleep, and the lady was like, you were jittering the whole time, like you were just the whole time jitters, like as in, like twitches, not jitters, twitches. And she's like, your nervous system. And I was like, what has this got to do with my nervous system? But so can you explain this for a sense, whether you're going for a facial, maybe you've listened to the episode where I said 25 ways to bring more fun in the business, right? And you're like going and taking action on things to have fun, right? One of them is a facial and all sorts of things like that. Maybe getting your makeup done, relaxing. And you're there. And when you're in that relaxing mode, it's like your body is wigging out on you because you're so not used to sort of just being like, you can actually relax now. So can you explain, why is this happening? Like, where is this connected?
Yeah. So what I will say to you is that super common, like that twitchiness, or if you're someone that kind of is sitting with your legs crossed and your foot's tapping constantly, or maybe you like twirl your hair, or you pick your nails, or you clench your hands, or you tense your shoulders. These are all signs that your nervous system is like, something is wrong and we are in a mobilization state, right? And the reason why this occurs, and over a prolonged period of time, potentially you notice it more and more, like you fall asleep, but your body is still kind of aware of your environment. So it wants to maintain that it is ready for mobilization, right? And you have elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline, which are going to be increasing your oxygen levels, so that your muscles are kind of ready to go whenever. And that takes a lot of energy and increases lactic acid buildup in our muscles. And so anytime that you start to like relax, that trembling or kind of twitching feeling is really, really normal. It's your body trying to discharge that energy. And if you allow it to happen, then you can kind of allow your nervous system to come back down to a state of calm. But most of us don't actually allow that kind of natural process to occur. But if you notice that you're like constantly bouncing your leg, or you chew like the inside of your mouth, or these are all signs that you just have that extra energy circulating your nervous system. Your system's like, let's get up, let's move, let's do something. And you're sitting down, especially if you work at your laptop or in an office or whatever it is, you're sending the opposite message that I'm not safe. And so it wants to stay in this hyper alert state. And it does that by maintaining that kind of musculature and increased mobilization of energy stores.
Okay, so we've done a little crash course. We've understood some of these areas, perhaps some signals in a sense that perhaps we might want to focus on this. Could we just go through, and usually I ask for like, what's a great action point? But I don't really want to do this with this episode because I feel like it's a little bit counterintuitive of what we're talking about here. So instead, I would love to sort of look at perhaps some shifts that we could make in our day-to-day lives. So rather than doing this, try this instead. Rather than doing this, replace it with this, and it'll make a difference. What are some shifts that especially, female entrepreneurs, we can do?
Yeah. So what I will say is I will never recommend that you replace something that you currently do with something else immediately. What I will say is that you want to add something small in that helps you start to choose a different path. So you want to add in a different option that you can do alongside what you currently do. So if scrolling at nighttime is how you kind of downregulate your nervous system and go to bed, then I'm not going to say stop scrolling your phone, because I think it's a safety mechanism and it can be quite detrimental to take away that safety mechanism. So what I will say to you is I like to do things in like 30-second to 90-second bursts. And I think that is the most accessible. I like to make them as novel and fun as possible. So like dance parties, especially in the shower. I think the shower is something that we hopefully do most days. We mostly shower every single day. And when we're in the shower, this is a time that we can actually utilize to regulate our nervous system. So my favorite thing to do is to shake it out. So if you're in the shower, put some music on, have a boogie in the shower, shake it out, get rid of that excess energy before you go to bed at night so that you're giving yourself the opportunity to rest your body. That's probably my my go-to. Like if you've watched my IG videos, then like shaking is always like my number one thing that I suggest to people, especially if you have people in your home, like your partner or friends or family, like have a dance party every morning if you can. And if you're working at your desk, get up and have a dance for like 30 to 60 seconds in between client calls or in between packing orders or in between doing something, so that you are allowing your nervous system to basically shift out of that kind of like fully focused, intense sympathetic state, down regulate, so that it knows that that state of calm is accessible for it. And then you can kind of go back into that sympathetic state again, but more equipped to deal with what it is that you're dealing with. So my number one suggestion, first and foremost, is to find something that feels good for you, but do it in small doses. So I don't recommend going like, in the morning, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes, because no one ever does that. So in the morning, while I'm like making my coffee, I'm going to jump around in my kitchen for 30 seconds, right? Like while the water is boiling, I'm just going to like jump up and down on the spot. Like that is a super functional and effective way that you can start to downregulate your nervous system. Also, and this is nothing to do with somatics, but very, very helpful, like put a hard end time for your work in place, because like I said, my relationship very much suffered when I was in full business mode. And what it illuminated to me was how important my husband was to my business journey, in that he was kind of like my canary in the coal mine of like, hey, shit's getting out of hand, you need to reel it in. Because when we would start to argue, or we weren't able to connect, or I was still working at 11 o'clock at night, that was like a good indicator of something had to change. So then I would put in like a hard end time of my work was like 7 p.m. It's way earlier now, but it's like 7 p.m. back then. And after that, everything I didn't have a choice anymore. I made it a non-negotiable for me. And this is really beneficial for your nervous system too. If you have these non-negotiable spaces, that it's like creating a dividing line between like work and home life, especially if you work from your home. It's very easy for it to spill over into absolutely everything that you do. So it's definitely something that I recommend, is having that strong boundary of what time do you finish work. Of course, sometimes it's going to change, but majority of the time having that hard end time. And then also check out my Instagram. There are so many somatic tools on there for you to explore, because I think it's all about experimentation and exploration of what's going to work best for you.
I love that. And we'll have Anna's link to her Instagram below. We'll also have all her details, including her book, The Vagus Nerve Reset, as well. Anna, question for someone who struggles to actually pick up and read physical books. Is it on Audible? Can I listen to an Audible version of it?
Yes, you can definitely listen to it's my voice. I narrated the whole book. So you can listen to 8 hours of my voice serenading you if that's more your jam as well.
Amazing. Well, I think that this is a really beautiful opportunity for me to start a new tradition at the end of each podcast episode. I'm now going to invite you to take a dance. Take wherever you are, like literally just step away from whatever you're doing. Be like, this is still a part of the podcast episode, Yeah, is like just to take a 20-second, 30-second dance break, because I already noticed the difference and the impact of this. And like listening, I think this is the new tradition courtesy of Anna. So thank you so much. Like I have loved this conversation so much. I appreciate like all the value you give. And I really, really recommend, if you haven't already checked out Anna on Instagram, go and check her out, go and follow her, because honestly, even when I am scrolling and I might sort of be scrolling away and Anna pops up and I'm like, perfect reminder for me to literally just whatever technique she's doing, I'm going to do this. And like, even just that has made such a difference. Is like, thank you, Instagram, for allowing Anna to come up on my feed. I know it's not what you want, but I'm probably going to step away from the app now. But Anna, thank you so much for joining us on the She Got Lucky podcast.
My absolute pleasure, Alicia. And I adore you and everything you do. So just keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Safe to say that today's episode was freaking fire. So once you have done your dance party, 20-second, 30-second dance party, right? Put on Taylor Swift, put on Benson Boone, whoever you want to dance to, okay? But I want you to come back. And whatever platform you listen to your podcast on, I want you to share a takeaway. It can be in the reviews, it can be in the comments. Okay, I want you to share a takeaway that you've got from today. Perhaps it's something in your mind or something you sort of didn't realize. Perhaps it's a shift, something you're going to do differently. I would really, really love to hear this from you. All right, that's it for today's episode. I will see you on the gram and I'll talk to you next week.